Hello, everyone, and welcome to YUCI Talks. I'm your host, Angela Crockett, and as always, we have another special guest today. Our guest is Leonard Dozier, and Leonard is a singer, songwriter, actor, but really exciting. He is a voiceover actor, and his voice can be heard, and he is known for his work as a voice of the NFL films. Leonard, welcome to YUCI Talks.
It is my pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to this. And thank you for that wonderful introduction, Angela.
Absolutely. Leonard, and I always like to start and ask my guests because it's important to know about the journey, you know. So let's first go back to the little boy, Leonard,
Yeah,
and then bring us up through some of the hills and the valleys and the peaks in this career that you're in and that you're doing so well, and what it took to get there.
that's a wonderful starting point, Angela. The little boy Leonard, I can tell you that little boy Leonard could have never fathomed this Leonard Dozier today. And the reason that is because that little boy Leonard uh, grew up being raised by his mother, his grandmother, no father, never met my father. And so my first father, and this is a very fascinating story for the group. My first father was somebody that came from the world of sports, and that was Magic Johnson. And interestingly enough, when athletes say they aren't role models, I always think they got to be careful there because Magic, unbeknownst to him, did one thing for me, Angela, as a kid that I think shaped my entire life. Magic, with that winning smile of his, gave me a sense of optimism as a kid. And so, if I just fast forward here a little bit to my present life and the accomplishments, health battles, trials and tribulations, that optimism that Magic instilled in me as a little boy is what gets me through this. But I say all that to say that I had aspirations to be an NBA player. So this idea of being an actor, a singer, and in the world of the arts, that would have never been, I think, within the realm of possibility for the little boy Leonard Dozier. And it wasn't until my sophomore year of high school, I was an excellent student, Pleasantville High School, Pleasantville, New Jersey. And Principal Norman King called me into his office, and he would call me into his office for various sort of representative things for the school. But this time he said to me, he said, "Look, there's a church in town. They're having their annual MLK commemoration celebration, and they'd like someone from our school to recite his 'I Have a Dream' speech." And he said, "Leonard, I think you're the best guy to do it for us." And Angela, I knew nothing about acting. I had my fourth grade teacher, Miss Puryear. She would actually sort of defy this notion because she feels that when I played Ebenezer Scrooge in the fourth grade, that was that was the birth of my acting career. But I still I still say that I had relatively no experience, and that day changed everything for me. It was about 800 people in that crowd. It was jam packed. I'll never forget it. Former Philadelphia Mayor Wilson Good was in attendance, a number of dignitaries, and I get up and I recite this "I Have a Dream" speech, and Dr. King is oozing through my performance, and I get a standing ovation, and a light bulb went off, and I went back to my principal and I said, "Look," I said, "I don't know what just happened, but I said I feel a different calling, and I said I want to be an actor." And I knew I needed to take acting classes, but I didn't come for money. And so he did something that I don't know that was ever done in the history of Pleasantville's education, which was he petitioned the Board of Education to pay for my acting classes.
Wow.
And I don't think that's ever been done, Angela, in the history of Pleasantville. And that got the ball rolling, so much so that I went back to my coaches, and I said, "Look, guys, my basketball career is over." And so the shock, not only, Angela, within the school, but within the community of Pleasantville, because people had known Leonard, this basketball player. I was there, Magic Johnson. It was shocking. that I suddenly said, bye-bye basketball. And I always say, whenever I get a chance to speak to youth groups, I always say there was something about me as a kid talking about Magic Johnson's infusion of optimism. The other thing that I picked up as a kid was learning to be a leader and to walk my own yellow brick road of purpose. Because we are in a world today where we're taught to follow. And that theme is ubiquitous, even in the suggestion that we follow people on Instagram, we follow people on Twitter, we follow. And as a kid, Magic Johnson's optimism, but my own sense of taking a stand to be my own leader. And quick story here, just to interject. Eighth grade, I got elected student council president, North Main Street School. Angela, I didn't have a lot of money. It didn't come from money. But the suits and shirts and ties that I did have, I actually came to school every day in the 8th grade with some sort of shirt, tie, briefcase. True story. And, kids initially are like, what's up with this guy? But the point I always make, even when I speak to youth groups today, is that set me on a course to basically say, I am my own leader. I am not a follower. I'm going to actually sort of set my own roadmap. And it's something that I encourage young people to this day to do. It doesn't mean you have to dress up in suits, but it's the idea that I'm making a stand to authentically represent who I am. And I'm not going to follow peer pressure. I'm not going to follow what the norms, cultural norms are. And so that
and Leonard, and I got to interject there and,
sure.
and hold your thought, because
Sure.
that is so absolutely amazing. I cannot imagine someone in school at that age taking that type of stance. First of all, to hear a calling and know it's a calling and know that it's a calling that you must answer.
Yep.
And then begin to follow your own, that yellow brick road, as you so eloquently put it, which is absolutely just blew my mind over here. But, if you could come into school in shirt, tie, a briefcase, how did the kids receive you? Did they pick on you? What went on?
Oh, they did. I mean, initially. Now, the interesting thing, I was this tall kid, and a good basketball player. So I may have had some attributes that, the quote unquote nerdier kid, not as physically put together, may not have had that benefited me. But the kids still picked on me initially until they realized that, no, there's something special about this guy. And I'll never forget this, Angela. At the end of my 8th grade year, almost unanimously, they predicted that I would be the first African-American president of the United States. Now, that did not happen, obviously. But think about what that means to a young man, to have your peers, after you've taken such a wild stance in your presentation, think about the after effect of your peers saying, this guy is going to, whether he's president, he's going to be somebody, and that does something to you as a young man. So I think, getting back to your initial question, that little boy always had a sense of purpose, a sense of a higher destiny, higher calling. There was always a sense as a young man. I mean, I can go back a year earlier in 7th grade, and I was the grand marshal of a parade in Pleasantville. So there was always something, Angela, and I think about my current trials and tribulations, particularly health-wise. When people ask me, how in the world do you do all this stuff still with what you're fighting and going through? And I think it all stems back to that little boy who just had a sense of destiny. And I lament, Angela, and it pains my heart that so many young people, they don't have that. And I think, if nothing else, the rest of my life, if I can spend the rest of my life trying to just give kids a sense of purpose and destiny and walking that yellow brick road of purpose, as I call it, it changes everything. Because whether you come from a broken home, you're raised by one parent, you don't have much, you're raised in poverty, regardless of your surroundings and your circumstances, if you have a sense of just destiny and a higher calling. I would even go so far as to say a sense of the divine. I always tell people I feel like God just has me on a string, and has had me on a string since I was a young man. That changes everything about your life. And you chronicled earlier on the things I've accomplished in my career. And I would say behind those accomplishments are some absolutely, and you think you've heard some stories already, there are some incredible stories behind those accomplishments. And it all stems back to this sense of a higher calling and it's really the thing I think is missing from a lot of young people's lives. And it's the difference between those that make it and those that don't many times.
How would you describe a calling?
That's a wonderful question, because there's certain religious connotations to that, right? But I don't think it should be confined necessarily to religion. It doesn't need to be. I think it is a sense of, you know what it is? And I would often say this, I've said this many times, when you run from something constantly, for me, even as I got going into the arts, and even in my career to this day, with all I've accomplished, I'm always trying to run from it, which is fascinating. Isn't that fascinating? Because I think that the little boy, and again, it goes right back to your wonderful opening question about this younger boy who actually had a different vision for his life. And somewhere along the way, even as I started to take these acting classes and get involved in the arts, as I got older, and the arts is a tough profession. It's not an easy profession by any stretch. I got to a point, Angela, where I just said, Lord, this is what you want for my life. So you have all the answers and I don't. So I'm not going to worry about it. You figure it out. You'll figure out how I'm going to survive and provide, and because this is not what I wanted for me. This is what you want. So I will just, and that's in many ways and manifestations, that's the attitude I have about it, which is, this is not really what I wanted, but this is what you want. And so I think that sense of calling is about obeying. It's about obeying. And again, I know that sounds religious, but it doesn't have to be confined to religion, because so many kids, so many young people, they know their gifts from a very young age. And somebody turns them away from it, or they turn themselves away from it. And many times that's their calling. And, and what interestingly enough, that gift comes back time and again. And in some cases, sadly, young people will get on the wrong path and never honor or obey that gift. And in some cases they do. And many times, even as you're accomplishing things and achieving success, the sense that you're still trying to run away from it. And I think of any great calling by anybody, and I think I can go down the line of successful people, and they'll tell you that they thought they weren't the right person. They didn't have the right qualifications. They wanted to do something else. I was looking at a story by Craig Melvin yesterday, Good Morning America. And he talks about the imposter syndrome, the feeling that as successful as he is, and it was striking to read this because I suspect that many successful people have this sense of inadequacy. And I don't know that I have that, but I think it's still all tied into, Angela, the sense of I should be, or I want to do something else and not this.
And that's a very perfect point you're making, because I think whether young or older, a lot of us deal with that.
Yeah.
And learning how to be, and if you can kind of talk about that, learning to be true to yourself. Absolutely. Yes, you can call it a calling and destiny and that pull and that tug and that knowing, but being true to yourself. Absolutely. Is really where that gift lies and that talent lies. If you could be so kind, as in your words, to be able to break that down for our audience.
Listen, this is powerful, and it's powerful coming from the vantage point of an actor, because the thought is that, and when I would train young actors and teach them, I'd tell them, You are not pretending when you're being an actor. So a lot of artists come into acting thinking that it's, I'd ask them to define what acting is. Oh, it's pretending and it's, you're imagining. And I said, yeah. I said, no, it's actually truthful behavior in imaginary circumstances. That's what being an actor is. And the best actors are true to who they are as people. And so really, being an actor is about being able to find truth. It has nothing to do with pretending or make believe. It is about finding truth. And so with coming from that worldview as an actor, I apply that to me personally with ease, because for me, it's important for me to find Leonard's truth, because if I can't find Leonard's truth, I can't find Leonard's truth in playing a cop or teacher or whatever role I'm going to play. Because if I can't find that truth within Leonard, how is that truth going to come out in any role I play? And then more importantly, being true to yourself is, and again, it goes right back to following your own yellow brick road to purpose. It's amazing, Angela, how many people, and it's easy today in the world we live in the vast social media climate, to compare yourself to other people, to think that what you're doing doesn't measure up to what somebody else is doing, and then all of a sudden you're off the path of what you're supposed to be doing. And I think one thing I'll say this to button this is, I've always known that my walk in the arts and in life is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And because of that, it has allowed me to be very true to myself, to the point where I can say, nope, I am going to definitively take this path. And I remember saying to an agent, and you know this business enough, Angela, to know that, agents are lifelines in a lot of ways. But I said to an agent, I said, look, anybody can obtain success. I said, but I do want success my way. And, I and that wasn't being arrogant. That wasn't being, that wasn't putting myself on some pedestal. It was just, again, another way to stay true to myself. And I said, yes, I can get success your way, this way, X way, Y. But I don't care if it's longer or harder. I want it my way. And because that'll ensure that I'm going to remain true to myself to the end of my days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's very powerful. And as you were sharing that, I thought back years ago. I was interviewing for a position in New York City. I'm not going to name the PR firm.
Yeah.
Very powerful firm. And I was so excited. And I'm finally sitting at this table. And there was a story given. And I like stories. I like to hear stories. But however, in this contest, it was, what if this situation presented itself with this particular big name person? And you had to lie and do this and that and things that are not, And immediately, Leonard, my whole spirit vexed. Because being true to yourself is what's more important. And although I understand their position, in my walk, in my character, my integrity, and my convictions won't allow me to do certain things. I wouldn't be good for me. It just wouldn't work for me. So I would rather, running parallel what you shared with as agents, if something doesn't work and it's taken me off the course, that divine course that matters at the end of the day, it's no. Even if I got to take the long road, even if it's the road less traveled, it doesn't matter. Because purpose, destiny, typically, when you're walking in your own truth, is the road less traveled. It's the road less traveled
Absolutely.
for you. And that's how we become those trailblazers and mark, and are remembered and make a true impact on the world, because we're not being somebody else.
Absolutely. 1000% correct.
Yeah. Thank you. Continue, because you absolutely share such powerful insight, and it's relevant and timely, especially in light of, Leonard, with all this social media now,
Yeah,
where everyone has access to all kinds of information, whether
absolutely.
good or bad.
And good or bad, right?
Exactly. And the competition, as you say, and there really shouldn't be no competition if we walk in our own truth. But please continue and continue taking us down this road to the man you are today.
Yeah, and this is, man, I'm loving this discussion because I think the other thing I always, when I talk to young people, when I talk to other performers, and that's the other thing too, Angela. I'm always mindful that my gift isn't for me. It is to give. It is to be of service. It is to help my neighbor to realize that he or she is lovable and capable of loving. And so Fred Rogers would always say that life is about service. And so that's really how I think of myself, even as an artist, as a servant. And so that's a very different kind of mindset. Sometimes even people that have been on my teams, it's hard for them to understand that. It's hard for them to understand that at the my end game isn't an Oscar or a Tony or any of those things. I could care less about that stuff. It's, can I be of service to humanity? So that's very important. And the last thing I'll say on that, and then kind of go back down this road, is about 3 years ago, some friends of mine, they produced a couple of pieces on Netflix. So they came to me with the idea of starring in a series that would be shot in Atlantic City, near my hometown, about a civil rights icon that, he was a bit improper in his business practices, though, and had a little drama to him and so forth. And it started to resemble, Angela, the show Power that was on Stars. And they were trying to get this pilot off the ground. So the short of it is, I said to them, no thanks, I'll pass. And they were just shocked out of their mind because they thought this would be an incredible opportunity, right? And I said, well, no. I said, because here's the thing, there's enough Black men right now on television in this role, doing this type of thing. It is not for me to cast judgment on those individuals or those shows. It's just for me to stay true to who I am and what I want to represent. And that's not what I want to do. And so that's, that was the end of that story. But it's interesting because by the time I get into high school, and so that notion of being president, right? Eighth grade peers saying, "Oh, you're going to be first Black president." So in high school, I ended up being president of my class all 4 years of high school. So some years,
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, actually.
Absolutely. And some years I ran uncontested; nobody would even run. And I started to, even though basketball was a part of the equation, it ended in my sophomore year. So I gave up basketball, took a lot of heat from the community, actually took heat from my own family, if I'm being transparent, because I had a family that was pretty invested in basketball. That's kind of where they thought I'd get my education and so forth. And that was not the road for me to take. And by senior year of high school, I was firmly entrenched in the arts. And just before my senior year, I started a business as a junior in high school, a registered business that still stands today. And it's called Cineplay Productions, where I produce theater. And so 11th grade year, I'm on the phone with world-renowned author Walter Mosley, because I'm adapting his novel and movie into a stage play that got produced at Pleasantville High. So I had this very entrepreneurial mindset, even as a young man. But even more importantly, a friend of mine says to me today, he says, "Leonard, it's interesting that you turned this movie into a stage play, because like 5-6 years later, Broadway started doing the same thing." So he said, like, you were ahead of the curve doing this. And that's kind of true. The Lion King and Beauty and the Beast were sort of the archetype for that. But no one had been taking non-musicals and putting them to stage. And so I'm talking to world-renowned author Walter Mosley, negotiating with him to get his novel and movie on stage. He certainly wasn't thrilled about it, but I was able to convince him that it was the right move, and was able to do it. And so by senior year, I graduate number two of my class. I auditioned at Juilliard and a number of schools, but the school that I really wanted to get into, Angela, was a school attended by another hero of mine as a young man, and that was Denzel Washington. And so I get admitted to Fordham University to study theater. I'm in college, and a buddy of mine who's a music producer, rewinding a little bit, I actually had written and performed the theme song for my high school graduation. So I was this Renaissance man as a kid doing all this stuff. And that's why my life today is, people who really know me, it's not really any different than what I was doing as a kid. But I met this music producer, friend of mine, and he said, Leonard, I'm with a management company who's looking for a male singer. And I said, look, I'm not a singer, man. I said, my mom's a singer. And I said, I wrote songs for her, but I'm not a singer. But they had other ideas. They signed me. I ended up getting a record deal, Angela, when I was in college at Fordham. And so that changed, to my detriment, I would say, my college experience, because now I'm in New York City and I'm a big shot. And record deal, and I got cast in a touring play. So for me, I'm going, well, wait a minute, why am I here? In my 20-year-old head, right? The 20-year-old head. And I'm going, well, there's no reason for me to be here spending all this money when I'm getting professional opportunities right away. So fast forward. In my life. First great obstacle was the record deal fizzling, because Polygram merged and became what is now Universal, and a number of companies lost their deal, me included. And talk about this road on my journey, because it has not been all smooth sailing and successful. I come back to New Jersey, 2 kids in, I think, 3 years. Had a journey, Angela, where I had, for the first time in my life, if you think about everything I've chronicled to you this far, it's like this magical story of a young man. Well, it wasn't so magical from like ages 20 to 23, where I was basically like a nomad for like 3 years of my life.
And how does that make you feel? What's that emotional space there after having what is a magical ride? Yep. Then you get met with this. What's that feel like?
Oh man, even thinking about it today, and there's some incredible heartbreak that I'll share later regarding this, but the emotional space for me even now, as I think about it, is those were 3 years of getting off of the path. And so getting involved in the wrong ways with women at that time, which can be destructive for a young man. And I saw that up close and personally, Angela. I saw the challenges of getting off my path and sort of now acquiescing to this other life of being with women, and now being a father, and really trying to figure out how to live, because now I'm in the corporate world, and I'm trying to find the job that I think suits my skill sets. And so that is all crazy. So I lived this life of 3 years of living in motels for like 3 years, 3 years. And what's fascinating is today, true story, I bought a home that is literally blocks from the strip of hotels that I lived in for 3 years as a young man. So it's amazing. But for 3 years, my life went very south. Now, thankfully, it didn't go so far south as to for me to be involved in drugs or anything illegal or illicit. So I'm thankful for that. But when you think about how I've described my life up until this point, this was a very different life, very, very different life from what I had experienced. And ultimately, it wasn't until I met my wife around age 24. I got married at age 24, so I got married young. But I always had a sense of wanting to, enjoy sort of a more connected relationship. I think that was always sort of imbued in me as opposed to just kind of, playing the field.
Going,
Exactly. And that really, I think, got me back on that, what I call yellow brick road to purpose. And, now I'm in corporate America. I'm working for the library in Atlantic City, still in corporate America. Ended up actually going over to the foster grandparent program, where I became a supervisor for that program. And this is going to blow your mind, this story, because my boss there saw me actually star in A Raisin in the Sun. And she came into the office one day and she said, Leonard, why are you here? And I'm newly married. I'm going, no, I'm here because I have a family. I've got bills to pay. And she just nodded her head. She didn't say anything. And I'll never forget this. I come in on a Monday morning, and there's a pink slip, Angela, on my desk. And she says to me, I go into her office, and I'm upset. And she's like, well, I said, what is this? And she goes, now you can go do what you should be doing. Angela, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. I get tearful thinking about it. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me.
that's,
And
Leonard, that is insane. But
yep,
so, because on this road in life,
yep,
it's not all peaches and cream.
correct.
And one has to know how to navigate through what appears to be failure, but in really, it's not failure.
Correct.
It's a setup.
It's a setup.
Go ahead.
Oh, I love that you said that, because real quick, my kids are grown now, but I would always tell them that, even just describing to you this college experience and how, life just totally turned upside down. I explained to them that was my setup, that may not necessarily be their setup. So they can't use the example that, well, Dad, you left college and look at how you turned out. That may not be your case, So, but you're so right. It was a setup. And she said to me, now you can go do what you should be doing. And to this day, she'll chime in on Facebook every now and then, and she'll see what I'm up to. And she'll just say, I told you, superstar. I'm so proud of you. And I was probably 28 years old, Angela, and I went to my wife and I said, babe, I'm about to be 30 years old. And I said, I've got some gifts that God has given me. I've got a calling. And I said, if I don't do it now, I said, my boss has just fired me for no other reason than to say, you're wasting your time in corporate America. I've got to follow that. And I basically said to my wife, if I fail, I'll feel better about the fact that I tried it. But Angela, I never looked back. And this was 2007. And each year, my career just went up and up and up and up and up. And man, it has been an incredible ride. Not without its challenges along the way, of course. But, as you chronicled in the introduction, to find myself as a voice for NFL films, to have 2 Broadway World Best Actor nominations, and to have all of this body of work. And a friend of mine said to me recently, he said, Leonard, normally people can accomplish something in 1 or 2 fields. He says, you have about 5 or 6 things that you do, and I could make the case that you're as accomplished in all of them. I don't know how I feel about that, but it's nice to be recognized that way, especially from a guy, Angela, who, again, as a little boy, would have never imagined this life. Never, ever, ever.
Yeah.
The only thing I knew, and again, I reinforce, the only thing I knew as a little boy was that I was going to be somebody, or I had a sense that I was going to be somebody important or special or contributing significantly to this world. But I certainly didn't think it would come in the world of the arts. That's for sure.
Wow. First of all, your voice is phenomenal. You should be on radio. You should be everywhere. with that voice, and being the voice of NFL films, that's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah,
And a lot of the world watches football, and
totally.
and probably hearing you with the films and don't realize that I'm sitting here talking to the man whose voice that we hear, um, which is powerful. That's a powerful voice, and it takes you back to something else. A thought I had when you were a little boy. You had a voice, a distinctive voice then.
I did. I
I
didn't.
know. I
Yeah,
didn't even have to ask that. I knew it was like it's something that is just a part of who you are. It's part of your anointing, if you will.
I didn't know it, Angela. It's so fascinating you say that because, and that's the other thing too. When I often talk about this yellow brick road of purpose, and I talk to young people, I always tell them, on that yellow brick road, you're going to get some friends and some guardian angels, and you need them. It's impossible to walk that road without them. And I had them early on, Angela. I remember teacher Leo Polisano at Pleasantville High School, and freshman year of high school, he got me behind the mic to voice the morning announcements every day. And I did that every day, all 4 years of high school. I would read the lunch menu and read, what announcements were present and so forth. And I'll never forget. I'm in the studio, young man, and this is interestingly enough. This was during the time as a young man where my life had spiraled out of, just spiraled downward. But I'm in the studio, still trying to get this music career back on track, right? And engineer I'm working with, Andrew Manzano, he said, Leonard, he said, man, you're a great singer. He said, but you ever think about doing voiceover work? And I said, no, man, I don't want to do any voiceover. I mean, I don't know anybody who does that. I mean, why are you talking to me about voiceover? We're here to do music. And he said, I'm just telling you, man. He said, I think you could have a great career in it. He said, I it's up to you, but and he bribed me, Angela. He basically he got me to do a promo for another artist who was releasing something, voiceover promo, and he gave me free studio time for music. And literally within like 3 weeks, he got me my first voiceover job. It was a big job for like big rapper and big R&B singer. They had a hit song out, so I voiced that promo. And I said to myself, wait a minute, he might be on something here.
Did you ever dislike your voice?
No. And that's a good, because I coach other voice actors too. And that's one of the things that I always hear. I hate the way I sound. I don't like the way, and I don't, and I maybe by the time too, I recognized that I don't even think it registered. And it really didn't register to me, quite honestly, the voice I had until I was in my 20s. But to your point, people had recognized it much earlier in my life. But for me, I didn't register that I had any kind of treasurable voice until I was in my 20s. And then I started getting into voiceover. Fascinating thing is, as I was resisting Andrew's plea to get into voiceover, it was like I was being reminded, duh, Leonard, you voiced the morning announcements every day in high school. You've already been doing some form of what you're trying to resist. So again, it goes back to that thought about your calling. And I see this happen with a lot of young people. They're doing a lot of times using their gifts, and they've used them many times, not realizing that it's already in them to do it. Part of the roadmap is already set up, but for whatever reason, they go a different way or they get off course. And again, it's so easy today in this vast social media climate we live in to get caught up into what other people are doing, and to totally get off your path.
That's the truth. Leonard, this is absolutely a phenomenal and inspirational story. What would you say? I mean, you've really summed it up about staying true to yourself and following that calling. What other twist or what else would you like to say about that as a final remarks to our viewers?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, even when you're true to yourself, even when you can achieve the unfathomable and unimaginable, imaginable for yourself.
Mm.
Life will throw you its curves. And it has thrown me, Angela, an incredible curve. And for those listening and viewing this, you hear this story today of me, and you go, "Man, what an amazing success story." And yet, in January of 2021, Angela, I find out that I was possibly born with a paralyzed left diaphragm. And the diaphragm had moved up into my chest, and it pulled my colon up into my chest. So now it's like a deformity, essentially. And it basically had restricted a lot of access to my left lung. And so I'm sitting in front of the doctor, and before I could get into any kind of woe is me mentality, I'm sitting here going, "You mean to tell me that I've accomplished all this stuff, particularly in the arts where you have to use your respiratory system? You mean to tell me I've accomplished all this stuff with like one working diaphragm and one lung and a half, and my colon's not where it's supposed to be?" So that was just another sign of God being true to me because I've been true to myself. And I think that that's what, and as I've faced surgery as a result of it and the complications thereof, it reminds me that being true to yourself, that there's a seed to that, that even, and Angela, think about what I said about that early optimism that was infused into me by Magic Johnson. There are days when I've wanted to cry wolf and be in a very dark place about this physical, out of the blue physical battle that I now face. But because of the seed that has been implanted in me, from the time I was 7 or 8 years old, it's impossible for me to go to a dark place because that seed has so blossomed now that even in the midst of my pain and trials with it, I am still finding ways to be productive. I am still finding ways to be optimistic. I am still finding ways to love, to serve, to give. And that comes from that seed of truth that was planted in me as a young man. And so I've never departed from that seed of truth. And there are times that I want to. There are times I'm like, no, I don't want to be optimistic today. I don't want to be in the mood of living and loving. And I just want to be angry about it. It's impossible. It's impossible. It's and I'll say this is fascinating to me. As I came down the steps to meet with you this morning, I'm walking down the steps, and I'm also recovering from a recent surgery. And so I have this pain still that I'm suffering from, and I'm walking down and I'm going, how in the world are you going to do this today? And yet the minute, Angela, I sat down in front of you, it's almost like that there's a light that is just inside that just turns on. And I'm not talking about a superficial light, a performer-esque stage light where you get in front of the camera. I'm talking about just there's something that happens. And it's like, God says, no, it's back to the idea that you can do all things through me. And I think that is just a seed of truth that's in me that even in the most challenging physical and mental circumstances, that seed of truth is there. And I also think, last thing I'll say is, I think that even with this new arc to my life, because now there's a new arc, now with this new arc, I actually think my best is probably yet to come. And that is, it's awe-inspiring. There are times I go, how can my best be coming now? But I actually, again, it's not a knowledge thing. It's just it's a truth that's been embedded that I feel. So again, I think this idea, and I would say that you can't think about if you're not true to yourself and you experience these vast vicissitudes that I've experienced in my life. If you're not true to yourself, think about how all of what I've described here today, how left it could go if you're not true to your sense of who you are.
Wow. That's powerful and truly that's life changing and life giving
Yeah.
advice. Because this life, as long as we live, it can be beautiful one moment, but then life throws a curveball another moment. And it's during those times when them curveballs are thrown, when we have a choice, there's a decision that can be made. And that decision is whether do I just stop twirling and let me get off, or do I stay the course
Yeah.
and keep my eyes on what I'm supposed to do and not on the things that are going on around me. Because if you really think about it, and we survey, and I do a lot of thinking myself about my life and things that I too had to overcome in my testimony,
Hmm.
um, it was true. It's true that it was during those toughest times.
Yep.
That's when you're made. That's when that real talent, that's when that real purpose comes out and is defined. And you can't help it. I heard, I was very young, but this stayed with me to this very day. Arthur Ashe was being interviewed by a reporter once, and I'm probably not going to won't say it verbatim, but the reporter asked him because he was diagnosed with AIDS, and not no fault of his own, because he had a blood
Right.
transfusion.
Right.
And the reporter's like, wow, aren't you angry? You've had this wonderful life, and look, now you get this stroke of bad luck. And Arthur Ashe looked at this reporter and said something that just rocks my whole world. He said, no, I'm not angry. No, I'm not upset. He said,
Mhm.
because if I have to be upset with this, then I would have to be upset with all the good that God has given me.
Amen. How about
It
that?
all goes hand in hand.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
know,
And when you think about, what I said earlier about my sense of, okay, if this is what God has for me in terms of my career, well, He's got it figured out.
he's
So
got it figured
then I
out.
can't have it both ways. So now in the midst of my physical trials and medical battles, then I still have to adopt that same mindset because He still has it all figured out,
Yes,
even through this, you know.
even through that,
So
even through that.
he doesn't just turn it off because so I have to look at it as a singular through line of God having it all worked out and mapped out. And again, it does take great discipline. It takes faith. It takes um, it takes being authentic, I think, to accept those trials and tribulations. It really does. I think when you're not authentic to yourself, it's very difficult to accept that. And it's fascinating. I was sharing with a friend the other day, Angela, that I starred as Dr. King full circle in a play called The Mountaintop, 2019, just before COVID. And this is striking. I was telling a friend, I said, on the final night of the run, curtain call, I bowed to the audience. And I said to my friend, I said, I had a feeling of being full. And he said, wow. He said, explain that. I said, it was like I had eaten my meal and I was full and I didn't know what to make of it. And as time has passed here, especially over the last couple of years and what I've undergone, I've come to define that, Angela, as having absolute peace with the career I've had. Here's what's very powerful about this. Considering all that I deal with today medically, I would have had to come to that place before this experience, or it would have broken me. This experience would have completely broken me. So I would have had to, unbeknownst then.
And so, Leonard, where can our viewers find you and keep up with you?
Yep, social media for sure. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm not on TikTok yet, though people keep telling me I should be. But again, I try to walk my own path. LinkedIn, and of course my website, leonarddozier.com.
Okay. And are the social media platforms Leonard Dozier as well?
Yep, Leonard Dozier. So in fact, Facebook is like Leonard.Dozier. But Instagram is official Leonard Dozier, Twitter official Leonard Dozier.
Okay, awesome. Well, Leonard, we certainly have enjoyed our listening to you today and sharing your inspirational message and story. It's been quite a journey, and we do appreciate you being authentically, expressing that story and not holding back, because I think that's very important when we're trying to encourage and touch lives of others and let them know, what we've been through, and that it's not always easy. But if we stay the course, and we have the right perspective, we can forge through and still accomplish what we were put on this earth to do.
Absolutely.
So fulfilling that call, fulfilling destiny, and answering that pull. For those who don't understand, it's a pull that pulls you in a direction that you just know you have to walk on that road, and
Absolutely.
That's what life is all about. Leonard, thanks again. We appreciate you. We know you just had surgery, so we really, really appreciate you being hanging in there with us and taking the time. I hope everyone has enjoyed listening to the conversation we had with Leonard. It was absolutely refreshing and life-giving. I've learned a lot from it as well. And again, for those who want to know more about what our organization is doing, you can join us on our website, which is www.youthunitedcouncilofIndia.org. And we encourage you to visit us. We encourage you to join forces with us, or just simply let us know how we're doing. We appreciate that as well. So until next time, everyone, please have a blessed week and create an awesome week for yourself. Ciao.
Thank you.